So today we'll have to go through a quick demonstration of the ZAP Data Hub solution for SAP Business One. And we're starting with a role-based dashboard for the Chief Financial Officer, and we'll go through a bit of a day in the life of what the experience of a Chief Financial Officer might be when using this solution. As you can see, we've logged into our dashboard. We're using a web browser solution only. There's no software to be installed on client machines. It's purely browser based. So let's picture a Chief Financial Officer coming in at the start of the day with his cup of coffee and sitting down in front of the dashboard. You can see here that we have these 5 at-a-glance cards, if you like, which have sort of industry standard type of KPIs that would be of value to a CFO when he sits down to get a quick view of the health of the business, how some of our key ratios are behaving, and whether or not there are things of interest that he needs to drill down or she needs to drill down on and spend some time investigating. As well as that, this CFO may be the head of a group of companies, and so we can choose to slice and break this down by varying different companies, the different companies individually, or we can even go in and change it by date and change things like the date. Have a bit of a conversation with the data just to understand what's happening, what's some of the data behind all of this, and we can hover over these visualizations, get a sense of what data is sitting behind these graphs and these charts, and just really very easily, very quickly get a snapshot of the business and how we might be tracking. Just a point I'd like to make here about these dashboards, and this is the ZAP visualization capability, and you get this as part of the solution. Having said that though, an important point to make about business intelligence projects is visualizations are great, colors, charts and all these sorts of things, but really people who use these solutions over and over every day, eventually you'll realize that it's all about the number. It's making sure that these numbers are accurate numbers, that they're timely, and that they're numbers that, for example, the Chief Financial Officer or the head of sales or procurement or whatever it might be trusts these numbers enough to make important decisions in managing the business based on these numbers. So really, you can make them flashy, but at the end of the day, they also have to be accurate. Otherwise, people will just stop using the environments and the systems. So what we've done at ZAP is we've spent a lot of money on building some smart capabilities and automation into our data warehouse and our data automation platform, which makes it very easy to bring in data from multiple sources and clean it and produce an environment that can be trusted, that spans multiple back-end systems. And we'll look at what that means during the course of this demonstration and how that can add a lot of value to an organization. So one example of that is, if we have a look, I can very, very quickly and easily now from here as the CFO drill across without having to change any menus and go through sort of an investigation. I can find where my income statement is. I can add that as a short click. And these numbers here, some complicated financial statements. They're very easy to produce for us. And these numbers are interactive numbers. So for example, for cost of goods, I can drill in on cost of goods and get a list of the transactions that underpin this. And obviously you can customize this report to represent any sort of data elements behind that. From here, traditional exporting to text formats or printing as PDFs, etc. as possible. And again, you'll notice that it's also brought with me the context that I started from within that dashboard. So if I had back here changed my context, that would be dragged across as well into that drill to keep me within that context. I don't have to continue to update my slices as we move through. So I don't know about you, but it's been my experience that, for example, for me on a Monday morning, we have a sales meeting and we all turn up at the sales meeting and the head of sales turns up with one set of numbers, the head of marketing turns up with a set of numbers, and we end up having conversations around whose numbers are accurate instead of making decisions around the business and what those numbers actually mean. And that's generally because organizations tend to grow organically, and we buy and add on new systems, and they're not always very well integrated. So HR might look after their HR system, sales after their sales system, and when we all get in a room to try and meet in the middle, it can tend to cause some contentious conversations. So a data automation platform that allows you to centralize that, to automate the process of ingesting all of that data and cleaning it and turning it into meaningful relationships. If we can automate that and people trust those numbers, reduce a lot of the if you like, the menial work and the busy work that goes into producing the numbers, and allow people who use these numbers to focus on the matter of running the business. So an example of that is, and how that might manifest itself in our day in the life stories, the CFO might sit down and say, look, I just want to understand some of this gross margin things, or I might find an exception that I'm interested in, and he can from here just drill straight across and have a look at the Vice President of Sales dashboard. Now specifically why this matters is we're not making a copy, we're not reproducing it, we're not doing any sort of additional work or work outside of what the sales guys are doing. We're actually reusing the exact same data because it's a centralized platform. It's the same dashboard that the sales manager runs his business from. So instantly the CFO can drill into this and pick up the phone, have a conversation with the Vice President of Sales, and they'll just work from this dashboard. And no disagreement on numbers, no argument on numbers. They both trust these numbers to be accurate and represent the true state of the business. That's huge. So in this day in the life conversation, CFO wants to manage some costs and some margin, and has asked the sales VP, they've had a conversation about it, and has asked if he could add a report to the VP of Sales dashboard, just for him to have a bit of a monitor and being able to keep a wary eye on some of the cost numbers within the business, and just have that attached to his dashboard so it's front of mind at the start of every day. At the end of the conversation they agree on that, and the CFO says, fine, excellent, I will get my analyst to get onto that report straight away and have it added to your dashboard. So that's the next phase of this process. So really the story here, as we're about to change hats, is centralization of data means that the consumers of this information no longer need to worry about where this data comes from, whether it can be trusted, and whether they need to do any work across lines of business. It's all done for them in an automated fashion. So this interface here is what we call our consumer environment. You can consume the information, you can do some drill downs, etc., and there's some interaction available within this environment, but ostensibly you can't actually change the content that you're viewing. So for example, you can't change these variables, income and expenses, to be something else at this point because the report was created in this way. So we're in consumer mode here, which is what the majority of people in an organization will use. But in our story, the CFO leans out of his office, calls in the business analyst, explains to him the story and the report he'd like, and that analyst will then go sit down and log into the Data Hub environment to create the report. And to create that report, they move into what we call our designer mode. So going to designer mode means that we move into the actual data environment, where we get access to the underlying data warehouse, we get access to the data elements within that, and we can now start building out new reports. I do that by going into new, and I have a number of objects that I can create. I'm going to create an analysis report. I choose which data I'd like to use. We can have multiple systems available. I'm going to use the SAP B1, and I'm instantly into a what could probably be a relatively familiar type of environment with a canvas and some elements that I can drag onto it. So over on the left we have our measures, the things that we count, and our dimensions, the things that we'd like to show those measures by, so by date or by customer, etc. I'd just like to highlight at this point, if you look at the list on the left, it's a pretty long list. It goes over multiple pages. I'll come back to that in a minute just to highlight something. So firstly, I'll go and grab a measure. So let's have a look at our order lines, and you can see that we have calculated fields and we have other variables that have been brought in here. And I'm just going to grab amount, put that in my columns, and then I'll collapse my measures again. And what you'll notice now is that list is significantly shorter. It doesn't even, barely gets to half a page. And the reason for that is twofold, or allows me to highlight two things. The first thing being that this is, as a data automation platform, it is a fully governed environment. We manage security, we make sure that users or people coming into this environment can only access data that they're authorized to see, that they can't get to information that they're not allowed to see. But also, what we do here is we know, by virtue of this being a pre-built solution, we understand where the data comes from, and we've mapped it all the way through from disk all the way through to the dashboard, and we've done all of the integration. We know the relationships between these data elements. So when you select amount, we know that these are really the only dimensions that make sense to combine that amount with. So there's no point in leaving all those other items in there and confusing people. We just represent the ones that make sense now from this point to use with the amount. Now if you have advanced users, you can turn that off or not. So moving on, we'll grab the date, make this a little bit more useful. We support multiple calendars. We do fiscal, we do calendar, we can do monthly and weekly. You can choose start dates and your week formats, etc., etc. We have spent a significant amount of time and effort on the time dimension, which is usually a very complex part of any business intelligence project, and we've done a significant amount of work for that to simplify it. For example, in this case, I can go into what we call relative time, and you can see we have a lot here, and I can go into current period, and just by dragging I can now go and get current month. And so what that means is this is not always going to represent the most current month, and it will roll as we roll through the year. What I can also now do is change this to a little bit more meaningful a report, and let's say that I would like this report to be a rolling 6-month report. So as we move into July 2019, January drops off, and this is just an automatically a 6-month rolling report. No further input is required from anybody using this report. So that's the first thing. We've worked on our time dimension. So let's make this a little bit more interesting. I can grab amount, and I can, again, using one of the time functions that we have built in for you, if I look at time and look at period to date from last year, I can fetch the same number but from last year. So now I'm looking at this year's amount versus last year's amount. As simple as that. What's otherwise a fairly complicated calculation, we've built that all in for you in the time dimension. Alright, so let's just build something out a little bit more useful. This time I'm going to create a custom formula, and I will create a variance variable. So we'll call it variance. It'd be better if I didn't have caps lock on. Let's call that variance, and using my trusty expression builder, I will take amount from this year, and I will, using my trusty expression builder, so now I can take, using my trusty expression builder, I can subtract from amount the same amount from from the same month of last year. So now I have my variance, very easy to create. Might go one extra step further, and we might actually create, in this case I will take the variance and we'll work out a variance percentage. So we'll call this one variance percentage, and there you go, we have our percentage. Now that I have that, just to neaten up the report, given that we need to create a chart and we're going to put this on a dashboard, I probably don't need the variance column anymore. I just want the percentage. Now you'll see that's not a percentage. It's very easy. Anyone who's used Excel would probably be comfortable with this. Select the variance and say show me that column as a percentage. Okay. So given that we have a change over time, I know a lot of the time we like to use what we call a traffic lighting approach to sort of manage by exception and highlight those things that probably need our attention. So in the variance, we'd be interested where we're in a negative type of variance, and we probably want to highlight those. So if I go to conditional formatting and select less than, I can say let's give those ones a red background, let's put white text, and anything, let's do that for anything that is less than 0%. And there we go. So now we've highlighted anything that the variance from this year to last year is 20% or more. Alright, so now, as I said, we do want to add a chart. So we'll take the chart, and obviously we have our variance on a very different axis size or interval, so it's not really showing very well. So what I'll do is I will create a new axis for it, and that's probably not a great representation. Let's change that to the spline. Okay, I think that looks a bit better. So now let's just turn the table off, and what we have now is our cost report as requested by the CFO, ready to be put onto the dashboard. So in just a couple of clicks we've created a new cost report very quickly and easily. Can be done by business analysts, can be done by business people very quickly and easily. So I'll save this report and I will call it my cost report. And I'll save that. And now what I can do is move over to my resources, which are all of my other reports. Find the Vice President of Sales dashboard in my SAP environment. So there is my Vice President of Sales dashboard. Grab that. I'm now remembering I'm in edit mode. So we'll turn edit mode on for this, and now I can grab my cost report that I just created and drag that into position on the dashboard. I might just equalize these out a little bit and make it a bit more friendly. There we go. Save that. And now if I move back into my consumer view, my Vice President of Sales dashboard will be updated, and we have that report sitting on the dashboard ready for use the next time the Vice President of Sales logs into his dashboard. So to this point we've looked at, I guess, these interactive type reports, and we've shown how we can create new content and new types of reports and put them on dashboards ready for general consumption within this dashboarding environment, if you like. So the last thing I'd like to cover today is some other types of reports that we can produce, and we call these packs. So it could be board packs, it could be report packs. Really they're a slightly more high fidelity, more specific use reporting type of object. So in this case I've opened up my sales report pack. I can and what it means is I can create a slightly more high fidelity. So in this case I'll edit my header, and you can see here that I have images, I have text, things that are plugged in. And if I go into edit mode, you'll notice I do this through very much a Word type of interface, formatting interface. I can change fonts and sizes, etc. I can do all sorts of things and edit this way. We can bold, etc. And then I can also start to bring in some of those metrics and calculations and even reports from within my resources here to add to this report. So in this case this is my header, so I'll close that and we'll have a look at the actual report pack page 1. So this report is designed for that scenario I described with our sales reports on a Monday morning. And not only that, it's this one because it is interval based, so it's every Monday we have this report, or we have this meeting where people want this report. We generate this and schedule it to run at 8 o'clock every morning and be ready in everyone's inbox by the time the meeting starts at 8:30. And I've gone out to the reports in our resources and just dragged some of the key reports that we tend to discuss in that meeting onto this page. So it's a very simple, concise one-page document that people can use and refer to in that report. So when the time comes about and the schedule kicks off, essentially what happens is this report is printed and then emailed to a list of stakeholders. And once it prints, it looks like this as a PDF format with my wonderfully fantastic graphic, and then all of my reporting items underneath that. So everyone who comes in the morning has this sitting in their inbox, ready to go, ready to discuss. No one's arguing about whose business analyst is better than the other, and we can get on with managing the business. So this is an example of a pack that is done on an interval basis. We can also generate far more complex reports in this ilk. So this is, I guess, a board pack. It's fictional while the company's real. It's completely fictional data that we've made up. And you'll see that we've, again, done the same thing. We pulled in some graphics, pulled in some charts from within the environment. Now the key that I wanted to make here was two things. One, as a data automation platform, we allow you to use, for example, SAP Business One as your core model. And then you can start to bring in data from all these other data sources that you might have, whether it's an external HR system or a bespoke billing system that you might have, or just some dashboards with key budgets on them that you want to bring in and associate with your SAP Business One data to give it better context and make it easier for people to make decisions from one environment rather than having to open up spreadsheets and put them together next to each other on the screen. So you can do all of that, but once you do that, what we can do with these reports is move from the previous one, which was purely every Monday morning at 8 a.m. What we can do is start to say, well, each one of the elements and the things that we're displaying here can be from any one of those systems that you're bringing in. It could be from SAP, it could be from HR or billing or spreadsheets. Because we've centralized, we can now interrogate each one of those, which means we can now start to build what we call trigger-based reports. So, for example, if someone's not paid a bill in the billing system and they've put in an order in our procurement environment and we have that in our centralized environment, we can match those two things together and say, whoop, somebody needs to be aware that this person's made a purchase but they haven't paid their last invoice. Somebody needs to be aware of this and call that person, and we can then build a report with the necessary information for the person to make that call, send it to them, advise them that the call needs to be made, and they'll have all of that information ready for them to make that call straight away. So essentially we can do trigger-based reporting, and those triggers can refer to data in many systems at once, or just the one system, or across systems. In any configuration you choose, we can do that trigger-based reporting. And then we'll take it a step further with this sort of high fidelity reporting, if you like, and start getting into true compliance and proper financial reporting, where you can start to pull in complex financial reports, drop them on the page, and once you've done that, you can add narrative to it. So what you might do is have somebody prepare a narration for this, but each one of these data elements, for example, could be pulled directly from our environment, from the centralized database. So as this report is generated, and every time this report is generated, these numbers will update to the latest. So every month, every quarter, every year that this report is generated, those numbers update, and all you need to do is change the narrative around it. Simple as that. And we've seen some customers create these sorts of documents and these board packs that last up to 16 pages long, with a lot of automation pulling in all of the data and the figures in to support the narrative. So that's an example of our high fidelity reporting that you can put together. You can have tables of contents and turn this into any sort of document you like by copy and pasting existing documents you might have, and then embedding data from the centralized data automation platform. So that's my very quick demonstration today, taking you through the Data Hub, the ZAP Data Hub solution for SAP B1.